So, Jeff, people have been finding ways to occupy themselves here of late, and one of the things you've done is you've gone to social media and you've put out some really funny videos about hitting philosophies, kind of satirically so. So I guess let's start with that. What inspired you to start to do that sort of thing?
It was kind of funny. I communicate with a couple buddies of mine that are scouts all the time, and we send each other these funny things we see on social media. And a lot of them are, these new ideas about how to teach hitting, and so we just kind of joke around and send them to each other. And we all played at some level, and never heard any of these things that are being talked about or taught now. So we just kind of goof around. And one day I was just out in the backyard with my son and goofing off, and I said, "Hey, I want you to video me imitating this drill that we saw." And he did it, and it was about 12-second video. And I was like, "I'm gonna put it on Twitter and see what happens." And my buddy, one of the scouts, says, "Hey man, you got 400 views." I was like, "I know, that's crazy. I couldn't believe I had that many views." And then like a few hours later, he's like, "Dude, you got like 4,000 views." I'm like, "What?" and it just kept getting more and more and more. And I think the first video is, if you combine Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, it's probably got over 15,000 views. And it was just goofing off in the yard. And the backlash, Jared, was incredible from a lot of guys that are teaching this stuff. And they kind of got personal with me and mentioned my son on social media, and it kind of got under my skin. I was like, I guess I'm going to have to make another video now and see where this goes. And the second video is probably close to 100,000 views on 3 different platforms of social media. But it's just a spoof. It's just goofing around. It's amazing how many people think I'm serious.
So let me ask you this, though, on the serious side of it. The game has evolved, and the way that the game is maybe understood has changed in some degree. And, I think I hope that in all sports that, continues to be the case, that we continue to evolve and look at, what works and what doesn't. But what are the things, with the way the game has changed, what are the things that you like and what are the things that you don't like?
I just don't like all the data being used now. I think it's and the video being used to compare, the greats of all time and their swings, and and then use that as the way you're supposed to do it now, because we're all different. We all had different swings, and in my whole life, nobody ever mentioned anything about my swing. If you could hit, you could hit, and we've seen guys, growing up a Rangers fan, you've seen, Ruben Sierra, Julio Franco, Juan Gonzalez, all these guys hit differently. And I think my problem is that we're trying to teach everybody the same thing. And Major League Baseball players, just by the pure fact that there's 750 of them in a season, starting out the season, there's going to be 750 Major League Baseball players in the world with over 7 billion people. So these guys are elite. These guys are the best of the best. And most of these guys are freakish athletes. So teaching young kids to hit like Barry Bonds and Aaron Judge and Mike Trout, to me, it's a disservice to these kids. They need to just go out and play and have fun, and they'll develop their own swing over time. And I think we've gotten away from that.
Now, you were not a guy in your career who would hit 210 with 40 home runs, and that type of guy really was probably frowned upon when you played, and that guy now is maybe more accepted. But one of the things I know in your videos that you discussed, in a comedic sense, but I know that just from being around you that you do mean it, and you sort of already alluded to that, but is this idea of hitting fly balls and really just like lifting the ball and that sort of thing. What are your thoughts on that specifically? Because that is one of the prevailing philosophies preached by hitting folks here of late is let's get the ball in the air and just, let the rest kind of play itself out.
That works for the superstars, I guess. But, the guys my size, I would have never made it, probably past AA, if I had tried to develop a loft in my swing. I was told to hit line drives and ground balls, and that's it. And during my generation, there were a lot of guys like me They weren't power hitters, but you could still have a successful career doing the little things, moving guys over, butting guys over. So that's what I patterned my game around, being that type of player. And nowadays, it's like the strikeout is accepted. It used to be the worst thing. If I struck out in the game, I was so mad for 2 days. I didn't want to strike out. That was the worst thing that could happen to me in a game, was striking out. Putting the ball in play, putting pressure on, I always felt like something positive could happen. But now the data suggests that, 80% of ground balls are out. So guys are, being told, don't hit the ball on the ground. You're going to be out 8 out of 10 times. And I think the whole game has changed to that, where everybody's trying to hit fly balls now and accepting strikeouts and low batting averages. And to me, that's part of the reason the game is hard to watch now. It's just not as much action.
It's funny because I remember when I was growing up going to games, which was while you were playing, I just was like, I was so hopeful that I would get to see my team hit one home run. Like, that was when I was 5 or 6. Like, that was the coolest thing. And now it's like, it's kind of the point where we're seeing 5, 6, 7 home runs between the two teams in a game. And then also, with all the walks and strikeouts and home runs, I have a much greater appreciation for just watching a shortstop field a ground ball and throw the ball to first base. And just the idea of the ball in play. You think, like, what are things that you didn't realize that you loved or you have a greater appreciation for? I have a greater appreciation for just watching the ball in play, even on routine outs, watching guys do their thing as opposed to watching a batter walk back to the dugout or walk to first base or trot around the bases. Not that I don't love the home run, but I don't know that I have that romantic relationship with the home run that I did when I was growing up because of the way this game has sort of evolved.
Well, you don't have the pronounced rallies like we used to have, where you string 4 or 5 hits together in an inning, guy lead off walk, and then you hit and run first and third, and then you've got action, then you have a chance to you put a crooked number on the board. But now home runs are rally killers. Home runs clear the bases, and it's just a lot of station to station, waiting for one of your big boppers to hit a home run, and to me, it's not exciting. And, I love baseball. It's my life. It's been my passion since I was a little boy. Over 40 years, I've, when I was a little boy, all I would do is get up in the morning and look at the sports section to see how many hits my favorite player got in the newspaper and what his batting average was. But now batting average isn't important. If you look at the last 2 years of Major League Baseball, last year they hit 252, the year before 248. They haven't hit that low in Major League Baseball since like the 40s. So to me, it's, station to station, waiting for the 3-run homer. And a lot of the strategy is gone where, managers would use their gut and put on a hit and run or a squeeze play and things like that. And, a good example is that, I heard that the Boston Red Sox weren't even going to work on bunting in spring training. Can you even believe that?
Bunting was such a big part of the way the game. I know, I went to college in California, and the knock on, whether it's a knock or a label or whatever, was that the California schools, they had the get them on, bunt them over, get them in philosophy that you just don't see anymore.
Yep. Cal State Fullerton, I think, was the first one that started that. You can kind of understand that mentality in college when they put in the BB core bats, because in my day, Pete Incaviglia was hitting 40, 50 home runs in college. Great hitters were hitting 30 to 40 home runs, and you just don't see that anymore because of the bats, with the BB core bats, so they kind of have to play the station to station. But, nothing is prettier to me than a perfectly executed hit and run with a guy going, runner on first, hit and run. Next thing you know, you got first and third, no outs. Now you got a big rally started, and I just think a lot of that's gone from the game. And, some of my teammates, Juan Gonzalez, one of the best hitters I ever played with. Juan Gonzalez, with a runner on third, wouldn't just try to hit a home run. He would try and put the ball in play, hard up the middle. If it got in the gap, he'd have an extra base hit. But his first job was to get that runner home. And now you see guys going up there, runners in the scoring position, and they're not thinking about getting that one run in. They're thinking about knocking in 3 runs. And the next thing you know, they pop up and strike out, and we don't score any runs at any.
Jeff, after your playing career, you got into the agency side. First of all, I guess to the origin of that, what excited you about making that move? How did that all kind of develop, you getting into that particular field when you were done playing?
Well, I wanted to stay involved in professional baseball, and I really didn't want to go back out and coach and, go in the minor leagues. Back in those days, you weren't getting a job right as a big league coach. You had to go, like an A-ball and start and coach and put in your time. And I'd been gone from home so much, I didn't want to do that. I had young kids, and I also had an opportunity with scouting. Actually, Thad Levine called me right after I retired and asked if I was interested in being a pro scout. And I said, well, how many times a week will I have to be at the field? He says, probably 5 or 6. I said, no chance. I didn't want to spend that much time at the field. I'd been gone for 15 years. So a friend of mine mentioned that he was talking to another guy about starting a sports agency. So I said, what the heck? I can be on the side of the players, like I always wanted to fight for the players, and stay involved in the game, make my own schedule, and work out of my house. And that's what I did. Started 19 years ago.
All right, so you got involved. I think, whenever you're out, you mentioned being on the other side. Whenever you're on the other side of things, even though as a player you're very connected to the agent because the agent represents you, there are always things that you don't know or you don't realize. What were some of the, I don't know if mind-blowing is too strong of a word, but what were some of the things where you're like, wow, like I was a major leaguer for all these years, and I had all these conversations with my agent, but I didn't realize this, or I didn't really realize that about the life of the agent and what they deal with, and I guess now, I can say what you deal with or dealt with when you were on the representation side.
Well, I can tell you this. I was an easy client for my agent. I didn't bother him much. If I needed bats, I'd tell our clubby. If I needed a glove from Wilson, I wouldn't bother calling my agent. I'd either call Wilson or have the clubby call Wilson or Reebok, whatever. And what I found out when I became an agent, was that some of these players are very needy. And, they're asking for all. We actually had a player one time ask for shower shoes. He didn't want to go spend $5 at some shower shoes at Walmart, so he wanted us to get him some $20 slides from Reebok or something. And it's just the players are very needy. They totally different from my generation. I also didn't realize how cutthroat the industry was when I first got in. Excuse me. These guys will steal your client, man, the minute you turn your back, and that was hard for me to take because I'm an honest person, and I'm not going to shake your hand and walk away and call your client. And that goes on a lot in this industry, and that was a real eye opener for me, Jared.
What were some of the things you enjoyed most about it? I know, obviously being a former player, getting the chance to fight with former players or getting the chance to fight for current players. But what were some of the most enjoyable moments you had as an agent?
Oh man. When your guy gets his first major league call up, I remember Mark Lowe getting his first major league call up, Ian Kinsler getting his first call up, Michael Choice getting his first call up. It was like I made the big leagues. You just are so happy. And a lot of people think maybe just because you think you're going to get paid now, but really as an agent, you don't get paid for 3 years. Once a guy gets to the big leagues, he's making the minimum salary. You don't make a penny. We make 5% or 4% off of what they make over the minimum. So until they get to arbitration or free agency, you're not really making very much money. And the whole time, you're communicating them, you're going to watch them play, you're getting them equipment deals, baseball card deals, endorsement deals. And it's just, it's a long process to make any money off a player. But I would say, the most gratifying is when your guy makes the big leagues. Darren Oliver was my first client. He was my teammate and my first client. And he called me in the off season and says, "Frye Daddy, I need you to help me get a job." And I was like, "D, you're with Scott Boras." He goes, "I know." I said, "Well, I can't do anything while you're with Scott Boras." He goes, "Well, stay on the phone. I want you to hear me fire him." I was like, no, that's okay. Just call me back. He calls me back 5 minutes later. All right, I fired him, left a voicemail. See what you can do. Within 48 hours, I had him a job with the Rockies, going to camp, and he reinvented himself. He met Bob Apodaca, the pitching coach, developed a cutter, and was one of the best relief pitchers in the game for the next 9 years.
I think he hit a home run while he was with the Rockies, too.
Yeah, he has one home run. I've heard about it many times.
I bet you have. I have as well.
No, Darren could really hit. He could hit.
Oh, yeah. If you look at his hitting numbers, they're actually like pretty impressive. And we were joking about batting average. He actually has a better career batting average than some everyday regulars at the big league level these days.
Yeah, he did. I mean, at one point, he had the highest career batting average of any current major league pitcher. I think it was around 220 or something like that. So he took a lot of pride in his hitting. I know that.
So, you mentioned Scott Boras, and we always hear about players represented by Scott Boras, and that's a big agency. He's got a big operation there, and I actually had the chance to learn a little bit about how he went about things because his son Shane was part of the baseball program at USC while I was there, and Scott was always around. But I know that the way he goes about things, or I don't want to say it's on one total extreme, but just because you're a Scott Boras client doesn't mean you're constantly interacting with Scott Boras. And I guess that's for some of the bigger agencies like that could be a downside to a player like Darren Oliver, who isn't maybe as much of a revenue generating. I hate to use the word asset, but I think, from a business standpoint, that's how they view these players. Whereas someone like yourself and your agency, you guys, there wasn't a client you had that you didn't interact with, right?
No, that was part of the fun of it. It was interacting with these guys. I have a lot in common with these guys. We have a lot of the same hobbies. And, Ian Kinsler, early part of his career, stayed at my house till 3 a.m. playing Wii bowling and slept on my floor, but it's not just because he was a big leaguer. I would do that for any one of my clients. But when you're in an agency that has hundreds and hundreds of clients, there's just not enough hours in the day for one guy to handle all those guys. And although they might be represented by Scott Boras or CAA or one of these bigger agencies, there's kind of a pecking order, whereas the guys who are the highest revenue guys get to talk to the big dogs. And they trickle down effect where maybe the middle of the road guy doesn't quite get to talk to Scott as much. Scott was my agent for 4 months, my last year in the minor leagues, and I talked to him one time during that. So, I would generally talk to my clients at least once a week. Some guys more often than that, just kind of depend on how things were going for them. But when you have a lot of clients, a lot of times you don't get to talk to the big boss.
What's something like realistically that you would change about the agency world, whether it's a policy or a rule or something? What's something that you think has got to change, either to benefit the players or to benefit the agents, just to make the agent-player world a better world?
Well, a couple of years ago, they changed the rule where high school kids could have agents instead of advisors. It used to always be where if you represented an amateur, you were his advisor, which the rules stipulate that you're not allowed to negotiate on that player's behalf, which all the agents negotiate on their player's behalf. That's the way the system works. But by the letter of the law, by the rules, you're not supposed to. But everybody knows Scott Boras was negotiating Bryce Harper's deal when he was an amateur, or Steven Strasburg's deal, or Arenado and these guys. So that rule, I think, needs to change. They should be allowed to have agents. Now, high school kids can have agents, but technically, if they just don't sign and then go to college, they're supposed to terminate their agent, and then it becomes an advisor role again, which to me makes no sense. But because of the compliance directors at the schools and the NCAA, they've changed that rule to where college kids can have advisors and high school kids agents.
All right, Jeff, I want to kind of get into, I know we're going kind of in a weird order here, but I want to get into your career. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was your time in Toronto, and that was the end of your career. What was it like playing in Toronto? I know that, I want to say, Was that right around the time when the Expos left Canada? Was it before or after the Expos went to Washington?
It was. I actually played against the Expos in 2001, my last year in the big leagues.
Okay, and I think that was that their last year?
I think it was.
Oh.
Because we bust from Toronto to Montreal. I'll never forget that.
You didn't? You bust?
We bust. Yeah.
Was that like just? Was there something wrong with the plane, or?
No. We had an off day and a charity golf tournament that everybody on the team played in, and then we had a little banquet, and then we got on the bus and drove to Montreal.
How long's that drive?
I don't remember. I think it was 5 or 6 hours or something like that.
That's crazy. I mean, because, we fly to Houston, and that's a 3 to 4 hour drive if we were to take a bus. But I guess one of the things that strikes me about baseball in Toronto nowadays is that's Canada's only team. But even when you were there, it was one of two teams. And I've never been to Montreal, but I know how French influence it is, and maybe I don't know if it feels like a different world over there because of that, but what was it like being one of two teams in an entire country?
It was pretty cool, man. I was disappointed that we didn't have bigger crowds. After a month and a half, we were in first place in the American League East, and we're playing the Yankees a 4-game weekend series, and we had like 20,000 fans a night, and I was like, man, this is. I realized it was a hockey town, and when the Blue Jays were, winning World Series, I mean, they were drawing like 4 million fans a season, and they were one of the most exciting teams, and the fans were going nuts. And I never really got to experience that fandom in Toronto. I did love Toronto; it was a beautiful city, but just, coming from having played in Boston, which in my mind is the most exciting place, Boston, New York, or Chicago, in my mind are probably the most exciting places to play. It was a little bit disappointing, to be honest.
All right, now you played with a guy who I don't know why I was always like really fascinated by him. Outstanding player. Maybe it's because of Toronto. I don't know why. I don't feel like he got talked about. Maybe he did when he was playing. He certainly doesn't get talked about enough now for the career he had. But what was it like playing with Carlos Delgado? I mean, this is a guy who almost hit 500 home runs. But when we talk about like the first baseman of that era, I just don't hear his name get talked about as much.
I know, and I knew you were going to say Carlos because he was a stud. And, the guy's hitting 30, 40 homers a year and just a consummate professional. First-class guy, but you never hear them talk about him, and I don't understand. He was, one of the top 3 first basemen in my mind in the game during his career, and he's never talked about, and I just don't understand that either, Jared.
Why is he – because he's not in the Hall of Fame, right?
No.
Why not?
I don't know if it's because he played in Canada his whole career. I think he might have played a little bit. I forget who he might have played with at the end of his career, but almost his entire career with the Blue Jays, and he was a great hitter. And it doesn't seem right that they don't talk about him much for the Hall of Fame.
He was on the ballot. I just pulled this up. He was on the ballot in 2015, and he didn't even receive the 5% required to stay on the ballot. That just baffles me because. You look at his numbers, and I could be wrong. I don't think he was ever implicated with any of the PED stuff. And you look at his numbers, and they're mind-blowing. The guy had an unbelievable career, and I don't know if he's a victim of a combination of what you talked about, Toronto, and then playing in an era where the numbers were inflated or whatever. But I was always intrigued by this guy because – it seemed like, as you mentioned, every year he was so good, but never got the publicity that I thought he deserved. Another guy you played with was Raul Mondesi, and he seemed like a guy who always had a whole world of talent.
Oh, yeah. And I played with Mondesi, I think, toward the end of his career, not in his prime. but he was a freakish athlete too. I mean, this guy could hit the ball 480 feet, and he had a cannon. He could run. I wish I got an opportunity to play with him during his prime because he was a special talent. And, I mean, back to Carlos, and nothing against Harold Baines. I think he's deserving to be in the Hall of Fame too. But, I mean, in my mind, do you think Harold Baines is a better player than Carlos Delgado?
No, and
he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I don't, and I think if you stack up the numbers, then it's even tougher to make that argument. Tougher to make the argument that Harold deserves in over Carlos. I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, Harold may have had more years and maybe bigger bulk numbers or something, but, I mean, if you go by the, year-to-year averages, I'm sure Carlos averaged upper 20s to 30 home runs and 90 to 100 RBIs for probably 12 years or more. And he doesn't even get a sniff of it. It doesn't seem fair.
All right, I want to ask you about hitting for the cycle. It actually came against the Rangers, and if my memory is correct, Ricky Leday was playing right field, and you made that day pretty tough for him, hitting a couple balls over there. But that was your last year, and to hit for the cycle, I guess just in general, what was that like? And then. I think you know what I might ask you about as a follow-up, but just to be able to look back and have that moment, what was that like?
That was cool. I mean, it was a difficult season for us. I mean, our pitching wasn't that good, and we just, we weren't really in the race. And, later in the season, you know how it works out where a lot of times, and we had a first-year manager, Buck Martinez, so he's playing a lot of the young guys, and so I really wasn't playing on a consistent basis, and I always got excited to play against the Rangers. And I just went to the field that day not even knowing if I was in the lineup, and I get there, and I'm hitting ninth, playing third, and Darren Oliver, my buddy, is pitching. So I was excited, and I mean, thankfully Ricky Leday was playing right because he hooked me up a couple times. The first one was kind of a lazy fly ball to right that bounced over his head for a triple, and then I hit one pretty good in the gap that he kind of took a bad route on and went over his head. And next thing you know, I'm, halfway to the cycle off my buddy. And then Mahomes comes in, he hangs a curveball, and I hit it. I mean, it didn't clear the fence by much and didn't stay fair by much. And now I'm, a single away from the cycle, and I think I'm hitting 240 at the time, not even playing every day. And so I was nervous about it because I didn't know what to do if I hit a ball that I could have a double on. So I went in the dugout to Cito Gaston, who I respected very much. He had, a great managerial career and a great player. And I said, Cito, what do I do if I hit one in the corner right here? He goes, well, stop it first and tell him I told you to. I said, are you sure? He goes, absolutely. So I go to home plate and, cotton mouth. I'm so nervous facing Kevin Foster. And I should have hit the first pitch. It was right down the middle, but I get a 3-1 count. And trust me, we were winning by 8 runs in the 8th inning. If it was anything close, I was swinging. So sure enough, I hit a line drive over Michael Young's head that goes all the way to the wall. And so I'm taking a huge turn around first, and I'm yelling at the first base coach, Garth Orge. What do I do? What do I do? And he says, stay here, stay here. So took a big turn, went back to first, and I mean, standing ovation. Kelly Gruber happened to be in town at an autograph appearance, and they called him over to the field. He walks on the field, the game stops, and, there was some controversy, which I know is what you're going to ask me next, about stopping at first. And I felt really bad about it because I was always the guy that took pride in playing the game the right way and not being selfish. And if we weren't winning by 8 runs in the bottom of the 8th inning, I would have had a double.
Well, I'm sorry, Jared. That's what I was going to ask because I know you well enough to know that if you were the tying run or if it was a close game, that never would have happened. But like at the end of the day, and I kind of felt this way. I guess I want to get your thoughts on what took place at the end of last year's Ranger season. But at the end of the day, I mean, you hit for the cycle, and no one can take that away from you. And I mean, as we sit here today, was anyone harmed because you stopped at first? I'm not saying that, people doing that regularly for whatever reason is the best way to go about it. But in that specific situation, I mean, is anyone worse for the wear because you did that? I don't think so.
No, I don't either. But I did get some backlash, to be honest with you. And, I felt bad enough. At the time, Jerry Nairn was the manager of the Rangers, and Jerry was the bench coach under Johnny Oates when I played for the Rangers, and I had a great relationship with Jerry. So during BP, Jerry was over there in their dugout, and I walked all the way over there, shook his hand. He was talking, I believe, to Eric Nadel and I think the traveling secretary, Dan Shimmick, or maybe even John Blake. I'm not sure. And I just shook his hand. I said, Jerry, I just wanted to come over here and tell you that I'm sorry for stopping at first base. And his response really was disappointing to me because he just kind of gave me the stone face and said, just play the game, just play the game. I said, yeah, I want to congratulate you on, being manager too. And I walked away pretty disappointed that, I didn't have to go over there and say anything. I don't play for the Rangers anymore. But I felt like it was, out of respect for him to go do that. And I read in the paper the next day that said he teaches his players to play the game the right way. And that didn't sit very well with me, Jared.
Did you, have you talked to him since?
No, but I talked to some of the coaches who were with the Rangers at the time, Rudy Jaramillo, who was my hitting coach coming up. Bobby Jones was my manager 3 years in the minor leagues. And they said, don't worry about that crap. Don't worry about it. And but it was kind of a bummer to me that I went out of my way to do what I felt was respectful, and I got that response.
So I guess I'm curious your thoughts. At the end of last year, Mike Minor was going for 200 strikeouts, which is not I guess it's not an individual game thing. It's a season thing, so maybe it doesn't compare apples to apples. And it seemed pretty apparent that he and Jose Trevino had a foul ball drop to enhance Mike's chances. It was going to be likely his last chance, and he ends up getting 200 strikeouts. And neither the Rangers nor the Red Sox were really playing for anything. Did you have any issue with that, or do you think of it similar to your experience, where it's like, listen, at the end of the day, this is a tremendous accomplishment for someone, and no one is harmed because this played out that way?
Yeah, it's hard for me to be critical of that. At the time when it happened, I wasn't a big fan of it, to be honest. It was, 200 strikeouts is, in modern times, that is like, that's a great accomplishment. 300 strikeouts used to be more of the, that type of accomplishment. And, with the game, the situation of the game and a close game, I didn't really like it that much, but I'm not going to knock the guy. Both teams were out of the race, and, it's a personal achievement that he may never have an opportunity to do again.